Good evening, morning, afternoon, or whenever it is you happen to tune in to Naked Tax Talk. I'm Jonathan Bengal here, the host of Naked Tax Talk, where we bear down to the naked truth about our personal lives, our business lives, and of course, our monetary lives. And here's what I know to be true. When we improve upon ourselves, the business gets better and so does the money, because both of those things are a reflection of who we are. And naturally, when you work with someone like myself, a badass profit tax coach extraordinaire, we make sure that those taxes are mitigated to as low as legally possible. You know, I'm always asked all the time, Jonathan, why do you have to always show up naked on your show? Well, here's the truth, babies. Because being naked for me symbolizes courage. It symbolizes the ability to just get up here and do it. Kind of like business ownership, the willingness and ability to just do it. You know, after all, it's like RuPaul says, we're all born naked. And at the end of the day, the rest of it is just drag. So today's episode, we're going to talk about meals for 2021. The rules have changed, which is going to be a lot of fun. We'll talk about that. We're going to talk about other business-related deductions for small business owners and things to watch out for and to pay attention to. And of course, I'm bringing on a really awesome guest. Her name is Brenda Kilhoffer, and I might have butchered your name. I'm not quite sure yet, but you'll correct me. She is a life leadership coach, and she also utilizes an app as well to help us to save money, honey. And she also is the voice of Cheap Mama podcast. And she also has her own Facebook group as well, where babies, if you want to be cheapy weepies, that's the place to go. So without much further ado, I'm going to bring on Cheap Mama, aka Brenda, to Naked Tax Talk. Welcome, Brenda. Welcome, Cheap Mama. How should I address you tonight? What should I call you, baby? What should I expect?
Just don't call me late for dinner. You call me what you want, just not late for dinner.
Just don't be late for dinner. I love it. I'm gonna take off my headphones now. So, okay. So you want me to call you Cheap Mama throughout the show, or you want me to call you Brenda? What do you want me to call you?
Brenda's fine. Cheap Mama's
Perfect.
Good. Either one.
Hey,
I'm starting to own it, but just make sure you know that being cheap ain't about being cheap. It's all about quality and saving money. I'm not cheap.
You know what's interesting about that? You're doing what I do. You're playing on the taboo of words, right? Like nakedness, naked tax talk. Right? People get all weirded out about it. They're like, oh my God, I'm going to see your dick and your tits or whatever. Right? Like that's what they think is going to happen. I mean, maybe one day, but the point is that like they get really scared with this naked tax talk, and you're kind of doing the same thing when you're saying cheap, but it doesn't necessarily mean what we think it does.
Right. And absolutely. My kids were afraid. They're like, well, he didn't ask you to be naked, did he? I said, I'm in my jammies. So.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good enough for me. If this office space was any colder, I would be in a robe. So it's all good. I mean, and I just blame the shriveling to the air conditioning. So Brenda, tell us a little bit about who you are and tell us a little bit about this life coach stuff and everything else that goes along with it.
Well, I'll tell you how I got involved is after 2008. So I've been in real estate now since 2004, had an incredible year in 2004 as a listing agent, and thought, you know what, it's just going to get better and better and better. Right. And then 2008 came, and what happened? Everything crashed, and I was still listing. I mean, I still was, hey, it's not going to happen to me. I listened to what all of the experts said. Oh, it can never happen in Arizona. It's not going to happen to me. I have listings. I had like 30 listings on the books as the market started to crash, and eventually people decided, well, I'm not selling it that low. I had investors. I had an investor group with transactions in escrow, and they all pulled out at once, seeing where the market was going. And, and I had followed the advice of, to build my credit using credit cards each month to do all of my expenses. I had advertising expenses, close to $25,000 a month,
Ooh.
Because I was doing so much business at the time. And, between my employees, the advertising, everything, those were my expenses, and putting those on credit cards. And then when the commission stopped coming in, I couldn't pay them off every month.
Right.
And eventually it all piled up on us. So we ended up coming out of 2008, short selling one house, having the deal fall through on a short sale for the other. So it foreclosed.
Okay.
And over 120,000 plus in consumer debt, including our cars and things like that.
Yep.
And so I knew I had to do something different. Something had to change. And we got involved with Life Leadership in 2013. And I remembered listening to an audio, and, you know, you're talking about naked and truth. And, you know, when you hear truth, it's sweet to the ears.
That's
Right. When you hear truth, you know the difference between truth and a lie. And when I started to hear some of that financial information, I thought, man, why didn't I know this? Why didn't anybody ever tell me this? So I became very passionate about teaching people how to really manage their finances, and teaching them not just getting out of debt, but what's the playing field of money? You know the playing field, know how to play offense and know how to play defense. And that was one of the categories of life leadership. And then also, when you give your best self, but you said it as you were doing your intro, you give your best self to the world, and you surround yourself with other best selves.
Yes.
Other amazing and awesome people. So I became very passionate about personal development and leadership. And so that's what Life Leadership does. At its core, we teach people financial literacy education. We teach people, parenting, marriage, relationship, all kinds of things like that.
Yes, you're watching the scrollies. You're telling the people out there who are watching us interactive, so they can say hello, comment, and so forth and so on.
So I just became super passionate about that. And as we got going, I got involved in 2013. So that was 5 years after we ended up in that position. And I hadn't made a dent on any of it. And on top of that, I had mounting tax debt too from being self-employed.
That is the prosthetic that no one wants to talk about behind the underwear. Is what happens when you have tax debt. I mean, that's a huge one. It's unlike credit card debt or mortgage debt, right? This is shit they'll hang you by the balls by. That's what they'll do with that one.
Yeah. And we hadn't been able to do anything with it. And I got involved with the financial fitness program through here. And in 6 months, I paid 60,000 of that 120 off.
Wow.
And then my husband got laid off.
Oh, crap.
But because of the principles, and of course I was pregnant at the time, so that just made it that much worse, because all I wanted to do was lay in bed. I didn't want to get out there and hustle. Right. Because I was an old pregnant gal. But we, because of the principles that we'd learned, we still got through that. I mean, on a like teeny tiny budget. I mean, yeah, we had to get on food stamps. We had to go on WIC. We had to get all help with unemployment and things. But even we got through that, and then within a year later, had paid off all $120,000 worth of super debt of all of that consumer debt. And stayed out of debt. And now we get to live on our 2-acre farm with horses, and I get to go ride my horses every weekend. And, so I'm just super passionate about.
There's a testament to that, right? So let me ask you this. And I find this fascinating. So you were riding high, if I may, because you're talking. One of my coaches, shout out to you, Chevelle, Coach Chevelle. She uses the ride one horse. She's like, you got to ride one horse and pick it and ride it, and that's all you've got to do, right? So she's always telling me about the one horse. Right. So when you talked about this, you were riding the high life, and there, winning great. Market out of your control. Let's be real. The market out of your control. You stumble down and you find yourself having to go to food stamps and all other fun stuff that's afforded to us. Thank goodness. That's one thing taxes help pay for. And so what I like about it though is that you were like, I'm not done. It was just almost like a reset in a new chapter in a new book.
For sure.
Right.
Sure. Yeah. That's I'm super grateful for that opportunity for a lot of reasons. One, I wouldn't have grown me personally the way I did without having those experiences. I would have probably gone on wasting money as it were, and judging me by what I had, by the trophies, not who I was. And
Yeah.
so through this, I got to become the best version up to this point of me, because there's no stop in that growth.
Yeah.
um, but more than that, early on, as I brought people onto my team, there were people who, were on food stamps, that, were in a position where, like, oh, I don't want to make too much money because then I don't get this or I don't get that. And or they would say, well, I can't go to that event, or I can't pay for this. I can't do this piece of the business, which were all critical pieces of our business.
Yes.
And because I hadn't had that experience, I would buy their excuses.
That's the truth.
And so by having that opportunity to go through that, I can relate to somebody that really wants a better life for themselves, for where they're at, because I can say, hey, I've been there. I get it. I understand. Where before they're like, yeah, what's she know? I mean,
Right.
look at this. She's got this. She's got that, so I'm so grateful for that period of time in my life.
And it's interesting because that's the part that we sometimes don't necessarily want to bring up or talk about. You know what I mean? Are those moments in our lives. And, like, the truth is, a lot of people assume that, oh, wow, this guy, he's a very successful, well-to-do, well-off, wealthy individual, la, 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 which is great.
Mm-hmm.
But I always have to remind people that this was not always my story.
Right.
This was not always the truth, right? I came from extreme poverty.
Yeah.
And so to go from that to now where I'm at, and I think what that does is and let me know if you agree with this, but I think it changes our perspective of how we work with others, especially in the entrepreneurship world.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I know, in all those years of doing real estate, there were folks that were like, hey, I'm not going to work with that person that can't afford more than the $200,000 house, because I've got to go from place to place to place. Or maybe somebody that was looking for a rental, and had horrible credit, wasn't worth their time because they were looking at the paycheck at the end, or what that looked like.
Yeah.
And, I too, I mean, I sometimes like to refer to myself as trailer trash, because that was, not that I'd like to, but, that was my first home. I was in a little double wide on single wide, not on Route 40 when I went to go live with my grandparents. So I didn't come from, I was the kid that had the ugly clothes. Yeah. So it was easy for me to get caught up in all of the stuff when we were up high. Yeah. And I really am grateful that I had the experience to, hey, look, you can lose all this in a second. You're no better. That isn't what made me the person. It was how I worked with others. And even from the very beginning, I was always somebody that, no, I'll go work that rental. I mean, I remember one of my favorite clients of all time was during the crash. They could only afford about $60,000. Now, those homes were out there, but they weren't always necessarily in the greatest shape, in the greatest place. And I mean, we looked forever for the right home. And when they found it, I mean, just the gratitude, and they love that house. And of course, they're the folks that call you back time and time again,
It's the truth, is the ultimate. I mean, it is the ultimate truth. And I think there's a fine line that we walk between, like, let me help those that really need help to come up, and the value that's also presented behind it as well. Yeah. Right. Because we can get caught up in the trap of giving it all away, but then still worrying about how to pay for my own mortgage. Right. And, it kind of reminds me, of one of Buddha's teaching, during meditation. And the teaching says that we always have two hands. And one hand, by the way, there's an episode I created called how cockroaches taught me wisdom. So go check out that episode. It's a fun story about Oscar the roach that lived with me. So on one hand, is wisdom that always says, wait, wait, wait. And this one over here is the hand that has the giving, kindness, love, all the positive, virtuous things that we do in our lives for others, right?
Mhm.
And basically, what Buddha says is that we should always be striving, right, to not only impact ourselves, but those around us, right? So
Mhm.
it's about their happiness as much as it is about my happiness. And so basically what he says is, though, at the same time, we use one hand of wisdom, though, that steps in and says, but don't go to the extreme. So what I mean by this is in my episode of Oscar the Roach, for example, and a highlight is I had a roach that moved in with me for 3 months, basically. I named him Oscar the Roach. There's a funny story how it ends. And Oscar decides to take up residency in my bathroom, and he lived with me for 3 months. And so what it is going, if I gave away everything,
Mhm.
right? Gave away everything, then I'm useless. I cannot help others if I just give it all away. And we do talk about giving, right? Giving is good, gratitude, et cetera, et cetera. But we have to use a degree of wisdom and to say, but yeah, but if I give it all away, then how am I going to be continuing to be helpful in today's conditions, right? In this environment that we've been provided for in this lifetime.
Right.
And I think that's what we're saying, right? That's what we're talking about. It's kind of like, yeah, we're not going to just give it all away to help those that need it, but
Right.
we're definitely going to give enough so that they can get up onto the next level, and then they take it to the next level, and up and
Right.
up and up it goes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about why did you play with the word cheap mama, and what inspired you to do that?
Well, one of the things that I got caught up in real estate was the image,
Mm.
and it's these, and that was at the advice of everybody else, have a nice car. Oh, you should lease a car because that's a good tax deduction.
That's what everybody says.
Oh, you should, right. And you should always have a nice new one. Your nails need to be done all, your hair, and so, and that was fine, when you're having months where you're bringing in thousands and thousands of dollars, and it's you're living within your means. And then when all of that tumbled down, I was still trying to keep up with that.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started really diving into getting our debt paid off, I had to learn a couple things. One was delayed gratification.
Dang it. Foreplay, so important.
Yeah. Exactly. And the other was, living within my means.
Yes.
And guess what? Those acrylic nails were not within my means. The couple $100 hair appointments were not within my means. The leased cars that I was well over the mileage on were not within my means. And I took I had an opportunity to really shift my mindset about that and look at my wealth as one, the quality of the life. And, what is it that Zig Ziglar says, live like no one else will today, so you can live like no one else will,
Yeah.
later, right? Tomorrow. And I had to really look at that. And actually, Christmas is always a real sentimental time for me, because in 2014, there was no money for Christmas. And that was a real test of, okay, am I going to truly live what I'm saying, practice delayed gratification and live within my means, or am I going to overspend this year again and pay for it for the next several months? And we ended up printing IOUs for each of the kids, and we gave them dates and looked at what their love languages were and fit things in with that. A girlfriend of mine teaches singing, and my oldest at the time was really into his music. So giving him voice lessons, she volunteered to give him voice lessons. My daughter just loves quality time. So she had, 10 dates with mom or dad for whatever she wanted. And, the other one was an acts of service kid. So I said, I'll make you a quilt. We'll get it done eventually someday. But, that was it. There wasn't anything else. We had that in their stockings. There was nothing else. And, food came from St. Vincent de Paul.
Yep.
And my dad brought some stuff over, and that's not how most people, and I know that and this year I'm sure was the case for many, many people. They didn't have it, but yet they used a credit card, or maybe they pushed a gas or an electric bill or a rent payment back several weeks to still give their kids the big Christmas. And I knew that, one, I needed to lead by example. And I really needed to test that. So that's really where cheap came from. We went to get to where we wanted to get. We went probably a good year and a half plus, where dinner pretty much consisted of whatever creative way I could make chicken and rice.
That's how I grew up for 18 years.
Yeah.
Chicken and rice, or beans and rice, tortillas.
Yeah. And a lot of times that's what the dogs got too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of interesting to because you said, living with inside our means. And what's interesting is I got 2 comments about that. The first one is can you imagine a world in which credit cards or credit did not exist? Right? Can you imagine that?
World.
You know what I mean? We used to have this particular process, right? And because you're talking about something so important, and that is with delayed satisfaction, really what that's about is going, you know what, we cannot really afford it because this is what's available in real life cash that's in the bank, right? That's what that really is about. Right. And credit cards, on the other hand, go, oh, we can get you access to that, right? And so most people are financially illiterate. I grew up financially illiterate, so I understand this. And so, you kind of go like, okay, well, time of money is a weird concept anyways, and blah, blah, blah. And so you swipe away. But living with insider means, if we were just to if we were to get rid of credit, I think we would see the price of goods come down to reflect what people are being paid. Yeah. Because that's the second issue that is also compounded, right? Is if you're an employee for somebody, you're being paid what the employer is willing to pay you, right? Mm-hmm. And then if you're self-employed and you're coming from, I was employed before, you're pricing yourself based out at your employment rates and not really at the business rate, which is completely different than what you pay an employee. So it's interesting that you said that. And then, when you talked about like living inside that means, like I said, I grew up in extreme poverty. So I know my mom, we lived off of $500 a month. This is me growing up as a kid. And at that time, it sometimes meant that my mom moved us because she could not afford the rent overnight, right? You'd be moving somewhere. It meant that my mom would always make rice or beans. Those are the 2 things you always ate every day, rice and beans. And my mom would make a batch of beans, a whole batch, like a pound of it probably. And it was cheap, and she would cook it. So the first time she'd cook it, which always smelled amazing and tasted great, you ate it like almost like a soup. So it would be like pinto beans, but you ate it like a soup. And the next day you would probably do the same thing. She'd add some more rice to it or something like that, or add bologna or add hot dogs, right? So she'd add some type of other protein. And my mom always made homemade tortillas. So my mom, she's from South Texas. So shout out to you guys. And they're thick and they're smaller around than here in the Sonoran, right? They're flat and huge. But mom always made this every night. That was our bread every night. And so when the beans were done being eaten like a soup, the next step is you repurpose them, and my mom would turn them into refried beans. So you would then refry them and turn them into a substance that's refried with a different form of rice. And then after the refried process was done, then you would put them into like a burrito with a tortilla, right? So that's how I literally ate every single day of my life. The concept of fast food, McDonald's, Burger King, all those things is what rich people did. Can you believe that? That's what, in my mind, what rich people ate was McDonald's and Burger King, right? Because all I ever ate. In fact, one time.
That's not even the case today. I mean, now those that are not rich, I mean, you find that more of the folks that are more in poverty levels, they're the ones going out and getting fast food.
Oh, I was shocked. I was shocked. I've not eaten fast food in such a long time. And we went, had a craving for a fast food hamburger. And about, I don't know, it was a month ago or so.
Mhm.
And I was shocked. It was $20 for two of us. And I was like, what the hell? $20 for two hamburgers? Get out of town. Like, this is ridiculous. But anyways, so that was like my life. And in fact, I was 16 years old, I think it was, or
Mhm.
15, 16. I had gotten off the bus and I was going to school and I saw a shiny object on the sidewalk. And when I got to it, it was 25 cents.
Wow.
And I was so excited that I found 25 cents.
Yeah.
And I walked a mile to school, and that whole entire mile that I walked, in my mind, I actually thought like of all the ways I'm gonna spend it. So I was
Mhm.
like, "Ooh," because it meant I could eat lunch or, something.
Mhm.
So I thought, "I'm gonna buy me," like, because in high school, right, you can kind of buy your own food.
Mhm.
And so, of course, I get there and I'm all excited. I'm thinking I'm gonna buy like the bean burrito at lunch, and all I can afford is a red apple. That's what I ate for 25 cents, right?
Wow.
So, this was my life. And in fact, even when I went to university, I was also what we consider a starving college, like literally a starving college student. And I worked full time. I worked 40 hours a week and went to university full time as well, and still maintained a very high GPA. I think 3.9 GPA at university. Um, all at the same time while still struggling all the way through my 20s. And it wasn't until my 30s when things started turning around. And it's interesting, in 2014, you mentioned how you kind of had a shift. And in 2014, that's when I was murdered. As Mr. Bengal, I used to be a teacher, and I was murdered on this particular day. And when he was murdered, and I say that because in Buddhism, we say that we impute upon the names and titles that we think is important to ourselves,
Mhm.
right? At the end of the day, but it's all meaningless, right? It's all
Mhm.
meaningless. And so, needless to say, I'm murdered in
Mhm.
2014, and I came home, and I instantly went into what I grew up as, right? So, Christmas, you mentioned Christmas.
Mhm.
Christmas was always a very sore and sensitive topic for me because
Mhm.
what Christmas represented was two presents or three presents every year, and is usually socks, underwear, and then maybe one GI Joe or one race car that my brother and I had to share. That's what Christmas was for us for
Mhm.
every year. And so it's kind of like, because this is like where we how I grew up. When I lost my job as a teacher and I was murdered, because I actually went home and attempted to take my own life, actually, because
Oh.
my real purpose of why I was born actually was to be a teacher.
Mhm.
Shameless plug. That's why I have a program called Rapid Tax Savings Formula, where I teach my students, my entrepreneurs, right, how to do what I've done, take advantage of tax law legally, right? So, needless to say, I was born to be a teacher, and so that's why I went to university for originally, was to be a teacher. And so when I, of course, was murdered, I lost my purpose. And that's when I realized that without purpose, there is no life. This is how people can go from, all of a sudden one day they're alive and the next day they're not, because there's no purpose anymore.
Mhm.
That's what I did. I went home and attempted to kill myself. And luckily my husband caught me in the act and was like freaking out. What are you doing? You're crazy, right? Like, da-da-da-da. And so I told him what happened and so forth and so on. And anyways, so when I lost my job, when I quit, I should say, for Christmas, I did decided that we were going to do, and to this day, it's still a family tradition, which is hilarious.
Mhm.
And what I did is I took old Christmas cards that, how you'll get advertising Christmas cards, or people send you Christmas cards, or
Mhm.
people give you Christmas cards. So I literally would take a Christmas card and I would scratch out the name. I just put one line through it, and I wrote the new name of the person I was going to give the card to. And then you know how it's got the message and then
Yeah.
the personal message typically? And
Mhm.
then where it was signed, I just put one line on purpose, just one line through it, and then I signed my name on it, and that became the Christmas cards that I
Oh my
gave out to
I love it.
everybody. And so it became this tradition, and then it was so bad, I gave my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, our used cups from Harkins Theaters. You know how like they expire? So on Christmas Day, we gave them the old soda cups. And then you know how back then you would buy popcorn, and if you bought like if you recharged it, you would get free
Right.
popcorn or whatever. So whatever the balance was on the
You
gift
gave him the
card, like
balance.
that was what I gave them as a Christmas gift. And to this day, that's like the tradition. It's kind of like it's all this used stuff. And what's interesting is on a flip side, believe it or not, this year was the first year that I said to my husband, "What are we going to do for Christmas?" And he said, "Oh, I don't know. Like, what do you want to do?" And I said, "I don't know." And I said, "Let's just blow $1,000 on shit." And I've never really been able to say that before, right? I never had the confidence to say that, never believed I could say that. And for me, it's not about necessarily acquiring crap. It was
Right.
just the ability to say, let's just not worry about it and go do it. Surprisingly, him and I, we just bought ourselves some clothes like shirts and stuff like that, right? And we didn't even go through the whole thing. But I remember when I uttered those words
Mhm.
and I said, just blow $1,000 on whatever you want. And I started crying. I was at the kitchen table and I started kind of like teary eyed and I was kind of just crying a little bit. And he looked at me and he goes, "Why are you crying?" And I said, "Because, baby, you have to understand, never have I ever been able to just say, go buy whatever the hell you want."
Yeah.
And to me, that's what financial happiness is.
It
Financial
is.
happiness is the ability to pay for shit that you want. It's not about buying new homes and new
No.
RVs and right. It's about paying for shit that as it comes up, it needs to be fixed. Like his car battery just died, picked up the phone $200 later, no worries, it's paid for. And I don't have credit card debt either,
Yeah.
because I, like you, my family, we filed for bankruptcy and got rid of all of that, right? You just do. And a lot of people have a lot of shame around filing for bankruptcy. But believe it or not, these rules and these laws were designed for that purpose, to set us free, to reset it. Now, of course, we must learn a lesson from it,
Yeah.
right? And not reinstitute ourselves back into that same debt all over again.
Right.
So, but needless to say, that was really my life dealing with this when you talked about living within our means. And then I loved how you said, our love language, and
Yeah.
how you saw and you tapped into the things you could provide for your kids based on the things you saw and noticed that they enjoyed. And to me, that's a bigger gift than, here's well, I personally would have liked a PlayStation 5, but who's looking? But you know what I mean? But it's kind of like it's more than that, because what we're saying and what we talked about in the beginning of the show, it's about the quality
Well, and
about
I
what we're
think
doing.
it's and it goes to me, it goes even beyond that. It's the stewardship and the teaching and leading the child. You mentioned it. You said I didn't have any literacy. I didn't grow up with any literacy. And your story about your apple for 25 cents, it shows that, because growing up the way you did, growing up the way I did, it sounds like you were probably initially a lot like I was. When I started working, got my own job, I'm like, oh, great, I got money. I
Yes.
I can get credit cards, and I would
Yes.
say I never had it, so I deserve it. I didn't
Yes.
deserve crap. I
Yeah.
didn't work yet. I was borrowing from my future to enjoy today. But
Yes.
but because and that was how, when you got that 25 cents, you're like, what am I going to spend it on? What am I going to spend it on? And
Yes.
that's how most of us operate. I mean, and you know, by showing the kids that, hey, it's not there. It's not, and what I teach them is it's not in the budget. I worked really hard to shift the mindset around I don't have enough or we can't afford it, to it's not in the budget right now. It's not in
Yes.
the budget right now. Because for me, freedom is making the choice I want to make for the reasons I want to make it. Not that my choice is governed by what's in my wallet or
Yeah.
what's in my bank account. It's, hey, you know what? This happened. I can do it. And you know what? We had our septic, you brought up we had our septic tank go out. That's
Yes.
$3,500. I mean, it was actually well over 4,000.
Whew.
To be able to not use a credit card and to, okay, it's handled because I have an emergency fund. That's more peace and freedom
Yes.
than any credit card, any
Yes.
loan, anything else can provide,
Yes.
in my opinion. I mean, and that brings me joy. That brings me peace and happiness and
Yeah.
security and all of those things. And it's not about the money.
Right.
In fact, we're probably making less money
Yeah.
than we were before,
Yeah. Yeah.
because we choose to, because it's like, hey, you know what? You don't want to work this week, don't work. You know
That's the
what?
freedom.
If
That's
I
the
don't,
freedom.
that's the freedom. Through COVID, I got to sit here and be at home with my kids.
Yes.
And you know what? There's a lot. of parents that wish they could be home with their kids. And there's a lot of kids out there that wish their parents were sitting there during the day while they're struggling with this online school crud and not having any socialization. You know, we get to pack up our horses and go out into the woods and ride, or, well, I mean,
Yeah.
not wood, but cactus. You know what I mean?
It's the Arizona. It's the Arizona. So desert
Yeah.
forest, so to speak. Yes.
You know,
For you
so
non-Arizonians out there, it's our equivalent of the forest.
right? Absolutely. And I've probably made less, and I'm okay with it. It's like, you know what? It's
Because
all
at the end of the day,
good.
it's not about, yes, to some degree, it is about, in the beginning, like you said, in the beginning, it is about the money. In the
Yeah.
beginning, right? Because like you said earlier, I didn't have it, so therefore I want it. Right. So then you do get it and you do acquire it, right? And it's just like again, I go back to Buddha's teaching about the middle way, right?
Right.
Because if the one extreme is to say, well, I just engage completely 1000% and I'll go live in a rock, right? Like that's like
Always
one
there.
that's one extreme, right?
I,
Other extreme is like we talked about earlier. I'll go borrow money up the wazoo and have nothing to really show it for, right? That's what will be the wazoo, right? That's the other
Mhm.
end of it. And that middle way is going, you know what? And then it's about practicing contentment.
Yeah.
It's about practicing contentment and going, I am content with the way things are. And we think that's a negative word,
Right.
but it's actually a very powerful word. It's a very powerful place to be because it says, I'm content with the way things are. Therefore, I don't have to do something catastrophic, right? So, classic example, I live in a working neighborhood. I work with all the gardeners and all the ladies that clean your houses, and that's my neighborhood. You know what I mean, Jelly Bean? That's my neighborhood still.
Yeah.
And yet I can go buy a brand new build, right? A brand new house
Right.
with no problems for now, right? But when those problems arise and I have a higher mortgage payment, I'm going to have huger problems. And case in point, I was talking to the with the DocuSigner, or what do they call them, a notary yesterday. We
Right.
refinanced our house for a lower
Mhm.
rate, right? You want to know something funny?
Hmm.
My mortgage payment was just $970 a month.
Right.
When I bought this house with my husband back in 14, I said to him, I want to buy a house so that if I have to work, God forbid, full time at McDonald's, I can still pay for the mortgage, right? That's the lesson my mother taught me, was always make sure you had a roof over your head,
Right.
even if you had no money, really. And so, needless to say, we refinanced, dropped our interest rate down to 2 3/4 from 4 3/4.
Mhm.
Our payments came down to $772,
Nice. Yeah.
right? This is practicing contentment because now I go $772. That's like one individual tax return I got to file for somebody this year. Done.
Yeah.
Right? Done. Don't have to worry about where I live for the
Right.
next year, right? Practicing contentment. Speaking of which, let's get to meals because you asked some 2 questions because we're
I
looking at
had two
time.
questions. Yeah.
You had 2 questions. So for those of you that are sticking this through and watch it all the way to the end, you all know that I like to give out some answers to tax questions. Now, here's what I'll tell you right away. I'm not your accountant. I'm not a lawyer. And whatever advice I'm giving today is not advice. It is mere entertainment. So with that, Cheap Mama, you had 2 questions that you
Yes.
wanted to ask me. And what was the first question that you had top of mind?
The first question was, so I know that when you are a small business owner, that you can deduct meals and entertainment. Now, I will sit and watch people on stage in our business say, well, yeah, people will give examples like, yeah, I went to Disneyland and deducted the whole trip. You know, what are the rules around that? I mean, I sit down with mine and I'm like, all right, I went to Disney World with my daughter, took the whole family. I mean, that was a $10,000 trip. I mean, realistic, it doesn't make sense that I could truly deduct the whole thing. What are the requirements? What can be deducted? What can't be deducted? What rules do you have to fit in? I mean, my husband and I are business partners. Does that mean if he and I have a business meeting over dinner, it counts, or do we have to have a client?
I love it. I freaking love it. So, let's talk about that, right? So, I always tell my clients and my students that there's a rule that my own boss taught me way back in the day, and I love the phrase: hogs get slaughtered
Mm.
and pigs get fed. That's what we live by. Hogs get slaughtered and pigs get fed, right? We can get nice and fat, baby, all day long, right? But you take it to the level where you're about to be sent to the slaughterhouse, now we got problems, right? So when this is the other thing too that I get leery about other people out there that will say things like that, right? Blanket statements, just
Yeah.
right off the whole shebang, right? That's what we did, right? Just write it all off
Right.
without giving contextual context behind it, right? Rapid tax savings formula, people. We talk about this in detail. So what this is it goes down like this. In my book, The ABCs of Deductions, An Entrepreneur's Guide to Write-Offs, which, by the way, you can find it on my webpage, jonathanbangle.com. You can also find it on Amazon as well. And we're coming out with a paperback edition on the 21st of this month. So I'm super excited for that. Needless to say, in my book, and what I tell everybody, you have to, in order to have a business deduction, and notice I'm not saying expense because they're not quite the same word, but to have a business deduction, I must be running a business. So we have to have a purpose, right? We have to be purposefully trying to create profit. This is what Uncle Sam's all about. You see, he's all about cheap mama, you making money. That's what he's all about, right? You out there, the entrepreneur, he's all about you making money, profit, right? And so essentially, he says you have to have a purpose. But then we have to answer two critical questions in the due course of business. And it spells the word on, ON, ordinary and necessary.
Mm.
Those are the two questions that must be answered yes. Plus all the other facts and circumstances behind it, right? That's important. Then what we do is we look to the law itself. And then we look at the IRS's interpretation of the law to further guide us. So I'm going to let you know right now that it is illegal for us to deduct entertainment as a business-related expense. There are loopholes for that. Now, for the most part, though, entertainment is stricken from the books. In fact, it was repealed in 2018 thanks to the Orange Traders signing of the Tax Cuts Jobs Creations Act of 2018. When the Orange Trader decided to sign that law for his corporate cronies, he also benefited us too. So I'm not going to diss him too much, but he benefited us too. But one of the ways that they negotiated was to remove the word entertainment. So they literally peeled that from the tax code itself. So entertainment goes out the door. But what's left behind is meals and booze. So if you're a drinker all day long, baby, right? We'll drink some wine together. So meals and booze, right, is what is going to be allowed in business. Now, prior to the COVID Relief Act signed on the 27th of December of 2020 by the trader, you had a 50% limitation to meals and beverages in 2020. So for those of you getting geared up to file your taxes for 2020, you're going to take 50% of the benefit of eating out. Now, I want to let you know that government, Uncle Sam, tax law is always created to incentivize the entrepreneur to make decisions in their business to make money. Plain and simple. So effective with the COVID Relief Act signed in 2020, in 2021, moving forward, we're going to be allowed to deduct 100% of our meals and our booze as it relates to business. 100%. Again, before that, 50%. Now you're talking 100% moving forward, right? That's great. There's only one reason why that occurred. And the reason is because for all of my restaurant clients out there, you know who you are. Go to Poppin' Tea Bar if you're here in Arizona. They have an amazing tea bar. For my restaurant owners, right? COVID had an impact on them. right? Massive, massive. In fact, all of us technically. I mean, every one of my clients went like this and then crashed, right, with COVID. All of us did. But restaurants particularly were hit the hardest. And so government basically said, we need to fix this. We need to rectify this. And so who spends money while they're networking, while they're out there entertaining future clients, while they're out there with their referral partners, while they're out there with their business partners, while they're out there with their prospects, right? While they're out there generating business, let's encourage them, COVID or not COVID, to go to restaurants and eat there, right? At least take it out or something, eat at the park, do something, right? That's the initiative. That's the purpose of why now you're going to see 100% write off for your meals and your booze. Now, what's fascinating about this is that when it comes to writing off your meals or your booze, because I'm a drinker, I'll admit to that. I like to have a nice glass of wine. You have to have 5 rules that must be met. And I talk about this in my book, The ABCs of Deductions. There are 5 rules that substantiate the deduction. You see, in my course, Rapid Tax Savings Formula, I talk about, we spend a whole entire day on class. I call it D for deductions. Sorry, D for documentation. Mm-hmm. And this is where I teach my students about documentation. This is what's going to cock block the IRS from coming in and going, I'm going to disallow the expense. That's where business owners get in trouble, is they act like hogs. The IRS comes in, audits them, goes, you're not allowed to do that. And now they owe money, right? That's what happens. And the reason why they lose majority of the time is because they lack the right documentation. And so when it comes to the meals and the booze, you have to have a purpose. I just mentioned that earlier. You have to have a purpose. Why are we going to drink wine together, cheap mama? Right? What is the purpose? The purpose could be because we're going to do some real estate deals together. I want to know about your business. You want to know about my business. Like we can, right? Purpose. Where do you write that down? On your receipt. You have to have a place. Where did you go? That's on the receipt. A date stamp, a time stamp. That's on the receipt. And you have to have an amount you paid, naturally. And did you know, for my servers out there, the tip is included in the total cost of that meals and that booze as well. So if you are going to go out and entertain, wrong strike. If you're going to go out and meet your client, prospective clients, referral partners, business partners, and so forth and so on, tip your waiters and your servers. Tip them, because that's also considered part of the deduction amount as well. So with that, that's really what meals is all about. So in the second thing, when you said, I took my family to Disneyland, and speakers have said before, right? Go to Disneyland and write the whole damn thing off, right? Hogs get slaughtered. The hog move is you write off the whole goddamn thing with the family there, right? The pig move, however, comes up with a very strategic strategy that we work with as tax planners to strategically, methodically think about how we're going to deduct the Disney trip before it even happens. Mm-hmm. That includes the family. And so there are loopholes that are available that allows us to deduct the whole shebang because we took the family. I'm not saying you take your family right now and you deduct the whole Disney trip. That's a big, huge X, no, right? But with very careful strategic planning, and I talk about this in Rapid Tax Savings Formula, we can actually make that possible. So what they're not telling you, cheap mama, is that there's a strategy behind what they're saying, right? They're just saying it blankly to you, but there's an actual strategy behind it. So that's important, because the number one, in my opinion, misconception that a lot of small business owners have is either A, I can deduct everything under the sun, hog move, right? Or I'm afraid to take anything. Right. And that can't be true. That's not possible, right? It's the same mindset that you and I, because I know this, if there's something about you that I know, just knowing you, that we've worked very hard to reprogram the mind to stop saying, I don't have enough, right? I can't afford that, right? We've worked on that to say it differently. Yeah. It's not in the budget, right? My board of directors has not approved that expense for this year, right? We've learned to rephrase it. It's the same with those deductions. That's actually possible. That's really possible. Yes, it's possible. But with careful strategic planning, it's possible. And that's what's key here. You can do it. You just have to follow the rules.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you for that answer.
You're welcome.
You touched on answering my other question a little bit there in the purpose thing, but I'd love to see you dive back in, because one of the other things, I'm in network marketing. I love the industry, and yet it gets a really bad name. And of course, one of the sales tactics for, with network marketing is, you having a small business, you get all these deductions that you wouldn't have, which yes, is true. And somebody joins and they're like, okay, I'm going to start deducting, the office space, my cell phone, the this, the that. And yet they're not, maybe they have a subscription for a product, or maybe they have a subscription for a training, some type of ongoing training. And maybe even they attend events, but they do it for years and years and years and operate at a loss and don't make money. So what would you say? Because, for me, obviously in my business, I want somebody who's joining because they want a business, not so that they can just have a tax deduction.
Yes.
So what would you say to that person that says, oh, I want to jump into network marketing because of the tax deduction, and they're getting something for nothing? What?
Yeah, may I? I'm like chopping at the bits.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, so let me go. All right, here we go. Listen up, peeps. Talking to you, my MLMers, right now. You must understand, okay? One very important fundamental rule when it comes to your tax life. And that is that when it comes to your tax life and business, the sole and only reason that you would go into business is to make a profit. That is the only reason you would go into business for yourself. Well, okay, spiritually speaking, you go into business because you want to control your own destiny. Uncle Sam also understands this too, which is why if you read my book, you'll see how each of the letters is a principle that guides the government and guides us so that we can have those deductions. But the primary purpose, the solo, the one, adin, the only reason why you go into business is to make a profit. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
A profit. That's it.
And you can't do that sitting on your butt, letting somebody else do it for you.
Absolutely. Make a profit. Now, you have a profit, right? Now, it does not mean necessarily that it's a bad thing you have losses. In fact, you can have losses all day long. A lot of people get afraid because they're like, this loss is going on for years and years and years. First of all, a loss indicates that you are mismanaging something inside of your cash flow. That's what a loss can indicate. Now, sometimes losses can come about, by the way, through other means that are not necessarily generated by you. So a classic example is in my book, I talk about this word called depreciation. I call it a fluff expense. It's not really an expense that we think of it. Notice, remember earlier I said deduction and not expense. Mm-hmm. So depreciation is actually not an expense. It's a deduction. And the way I explain it, it's kind of like Uncle Sam realizing that your shit's going to be used and he wants to give you a benefit for it being used over a period of time. Rental buildings typically are 27 and a half years. Furniture, fixture, and equipment, typically 5 to 7 years. Cars, 5 to 7 years, et cetera, right? So essentially read my book. You'll know more about it. But my point is that these are what's available to business owners, right? These deductions. You're going to do it to make a profit. Depreciation could create a loss. Not your fault. Government gave that to you, right? That's something different. But if you've got losses on your books being created because of something else, like mismanagement of funds, now, honey bunnies, we got to talk. You got to talk to Cheap Mama. You got to talk to me. You got to talk to somebody, right? Because that's an indication. And if it's happening year after year after year after year, we've got problems. Now, where MLMers get burned is they inherently are told You go out there and make money. Go make yourself a business, right? Immediately opening up to tax deductions, and they go hog wild, right?
Mhm.
And they start deducting everything on the moon, including the cat. Well, here's the thing, right? I have to have a purpose. Remember two things: ordinary and necessary. Is it ordinary in the course of business, and is it necessary to make money that I have to spend the money? So with MLMers, that's a harder case to prove, because when it comes to business ownership, it's on us to prove to the government that we are trying our best to make a profit, that we have a purpose, we have intention, that we're spending time inside of our business attempting to make the money, that we're showing up to networking events, to where we're conversing with other experts that can help us to make even more money, right? We have to demonstrate that we are making an attempt to make money. So if you're an MLMer that's just kind of like, oh, yeah, I'll order the product, I'm going to pre-purchase the product, and that's my expense. Honey bunnies, have I got some news for you? Come join me tomorrow for my Total Financial Happiness Mastery 2-day live event, because we'll talk about the number one rule that every business owner lives by to make money. We call this the accounting formula. And when you buy product, that is not an expense. It's considered inventory. It's not an expense. And so that's the number one mistake they make. They go and they buy all this product thinking that that's going to be an expense. It's not, right? That's the first issue. The second issue is we've got to put in the time. How much time are you devoting to this, right? We all have had full-time jobs and then had a side hustle, right? Worked part-time. We've all been there, done that, right? I even wrote the book, almost. The point is we've all done that. And here's the thing, right? You got to prove it. The time commitment. Were you participating materially in your business, right? So for example, where home-based business owners can get trapped in is they have a home office, but they have a bed in there. They have a dresser drawer, right? They might even have the poles up to tie up your sexy buddy on, right? The point is that it's not an office unless you're a porn star. If you're on Pornhub.com, then we might have a better excuse to use that bedroom for that purpose. But otherwise, there should be no bedroom shit in your home office, right? So we have to live by the rules in order to win the game of tax. Plain and simple. So for my MLMers out there, yes, make money. You can have losses. Don't get me wrong. You can have losses. But if you have losses because it's just like I sell one product once a month and I have one client, you're not a business. I hate to break it to you, but you're not a business. And that's my 2 cents.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Those are great questions. They're really great questions.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And I think so many people don't have, I mean, I knew some of the answer to that, not all of it, obviously, but, I think so many people just don't know.
That's right. That's the number one thing. I don't know what I don't know. Yeah. And that's partly why I wrote the book, The ABCs of Deductions, to start to reveal. My tagline is I guide small women business owners, right? And I don't mean small, like tiny. I mean less than $25 million. Let's be real here. IRS rules, a small business is someone who makes less than $25 million a year in gross receipts. So if you're making like some of my clients that are millionaires, you're considered a small business, just saying. So I wrote this book, The ABC Deductions, to remove that. So I guide small business women entrepreneurs through the darkness of taxation. That's the unknowing. And then I shine the light to financial happiness, which I just mentioned earlier on the show, the ability to pay for things when they come up. So if you'd like to connect with Brenda, she gave us her Facebook. There she is right there. You can go Facebook her, follow her, get on her Cheap Mama things.
Yes.
She's going to launch a podcast here. She's the voice of Cheap Mama podcast. She's going to be launching that here, where she's probably going to share some tips with us. I imagine just the tip with all of us on a lot of things, which I'm super excited for. And then, of course, if you are interested in joining my next Rapid Tax Savings Formula course, it's coming out February the 8th at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. It's a 5-week-long course where we teach you the profit mindset. We talk about how to separate yourself from your own business, because we unfortunately believe that the business is me and I'm the business. And then we talk about what is the right entity choice for protection. And that's where I talk about sex and entities. You can check out some other episodes when I talk about sex and entities. And then we talk about advanced deductions, like how to take all those kids to Disneyland and write the whole thing off. And then we talk, the last thing we talk about is documentation. And then we have a live 2-day event that I call Financial Happiness Mastery. And that's where we get into the nuts and bolts around how we make financial decisions in our businesses to make us profitable and to ultimately create financial happiness. And so, with all of that, if you all want that, it's February 8th. I'm going to put a link here. You can find it on jonathanbengal.com as well. It's only, are you ready for this? It's a 100% tax deductible investment for you as a business owner of just $997. And here's what I'll share with you. If that isn't enough for you, I've got a freebie for you guys tonight because I thought about it. And I realized that this was a great conversation that Brenda brought up for all of us, which is these deductions and that stuff. So what I'm going to do right now in the chat is I'm actually going to give you guys, and Brenda, if you have a freebie you want to throw out there and join me on this, please feel free to, and I'll put the link there. We're going to offer you guys something that I call 7 ways to legally shred your taxes overnight. And I mean that. Tax season has come to an end. By the way, trying to do shit so you get more money back on your tax return for 2020 is considered illegal now, just saying, because it's past the due date. Okay. So really, you can only plan for 2021. But my document will help you achieve that goal for 2021 specifically. 7 ways to legally shred your taxes overnight. And 7 simple principles to shred your taxes.
And what I will add to that then for you is from our financial fitness program, one of the audios that absolutely changed my life was one called Camel in the Tent.
Ooh.
And I will send that out as a download.
Please do. Camel in the Tent. I'm going to put that down. It's an audio video.
It's an audio.
Okay, an audio from Brenda.
Do I just send that to you, or?
You can put it in the private chat here. So you guys all know what's happening behind the scenes. We have a private chat. She's going to put it in the private chat.
Okay.
Then I will reshare the link on the comments right now for everybody to click on and see.
Now, just so it is only good, they self-destruct in 72 hours. So you definitely want to listen to it within the first 72 hours.
I like that. 72. You know what we're doing, peeps? We're creating something called scarcity. We need this in business. Because the truth is that the information that we share, regardless of our industry, is always changing moment by moment. And so one day I come up with 7 strategies. Those 7 strategies may not apply in 2021 or 2022, I should say. Gotta change it up. Self-destruct. Brenda's talking about this episode. What she talks about changed her life.
Yes.
The principles that are being applied to help us apply today may not apply in 5 years, hence the self-destruction. Am I right?
Yes, you are absolutely right. So, and I've got something goofy going on here. I've got to get it fixed.
And if not, you can always send it to me as well through email, and I'll put it in the show notes when we send out for next week's episode.
I will do that because it is.
Yeah, we'll do that. We're gonna do that for you, Brenda. Fear thee not. We will take care of that for you. But needless to say, I hope you guys enjoyed my show. I have to say thank you to all of my audience out there. To my mom, she's watching us right now, by the way. So love you too, Mom. Love you too. Lots of hugs. Lots of hugs.
Hi, Mom.
So she's my number 1 fan, of course. I got a lot of number 1 fans out there too. But I gotta say thank you to everybody for watching. And then Brenda, I've got to say thank you to you for being so kind as to be a guest here on my show. And so thank you so much for sharing your time with us and sharing your amazing information and giving me an opportunity to self-plug. So I appreciate that.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. It's fun. It's always fun being in your space. You have so much energy and joy about you, and it's always fun just sharing space with you. And I'm super grateful to have had this time this evening.
Me too. Thank you so much. So with that, next week, it's going to be me solo this time around. So it's going to be a solo situation. That's okay though, because we're going to talk about how important it is that we follow our intuition.
Yes.
That is key. In fact, I posted a thing on Facebook last week that said that, when we stop listening to our own intuition and listening to the intuition of others, that's when we lose profit. So listen to your intuition. We have all been born with this gift. So next week we'll talk about that. And with that, I say good night. Thank you to everybody once again. And may you all have an amazing time. And remember, the reason why we're in business is to create mucho dinero. I'm Jonathan Bengal here with Naked Tax Talk Raw. And thank you so much for watching my show. Boom, 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 boom.